this part of the build, we are going to be installing the motherboard, graphics card, RAM, power supply, LAN PCI card, Wi-Fi PCI card, 2 SSD drives, and the 4TB hard drive. The water cooler for the processor is on back order, so I will install the processor in the next part of the video. First, I'm going to take the motherboard out of its packaging and prep it to accept the RAM. To install the RAM, you will open the RAM slots by pushing on the thumb tabs at each end of the slot. Push each card into the slot. You want to hear a little click and see that the tabs close back into place. When you push the cards in, you want to apply even pressure along the whole card. Now I will put the motherboard aside to install the power supply unit. In the box that comes with the case, there will be set screws that are made for the power supply. It is easiest to stand the case up to do this. Slide the power supply back into its position and then tighten the screws. A common theme for tightening screws in building a computer is to tighten in an X pattern by always going across from the screw you just tightened. To install the motherboard, there is a little back plate that needs to be inserted in the back of the case. Check to see which way the plate has to face and then snap it into place. Take off the covers on the various ports on the back of the motherboard and then set it into your case. This case already has standoffs for the motherboard installed in the correct places, but in some other cases and motherboard combos, you might have to either move or add your own standoffs. I screwed the motherboard in starting from the inner side and worked my way around, lining up the holes and putting the screws in. Then I went around a second time, tightening them all the way down. For the graphics card, you first start by removing the back brackets on the case. This is made to be temporary until the various PCI cards are added. Even though these are made to be able to be loosened by just your fingers, I had to use a mini wrench because they were too stiff and in such a small place that I couldn't get them out with just my fingers. I took the graphics card out and removed some more temporary covers from the front of the card. I also decided now would be a good time to take the plastic wrap off instead of having to worry about that after it is put in the case. This part was a bit tricky. You open the PCI port the same way the RAM slots were opened. Then you line up the card with the slot, but also make sure that the two prongs you can see here in the camera line up with where they go in the case so the card can stand on edge. Then use the same screws that held in the temporary brackets to hold the graphics card into place. The first PCI card that I'm going to install is the LAN PCI card. I showed you here the two screws that need to come out to switch the back plate to the longer one that is needed for my case. You can see the size difference of the two plates. I then take the longer one and add it on because that's the size I have on the back of my case. Then you slide the PCI card into the slot and then tighten the thumb screw like we did on the graphics card. The next PCI accessory I want to add is my Wi-Fi card. My computer won't be by the internet router, so I will obviously need Wi-Fi to access the internet. You can add this one to the case just like all the other PCI cards. Once it's installed, then you put on the 3 little antennas. In the hard drive bay, there's room for 6 hard drives. I'm taking off the top cage to have more room for airflow coming from the front fan. To install the hard drives, you take off the side pieces, put in the hard drive, and then click the sides back into place to hold it securely in. Then you take the whole assembly and slide it into the cage. To install the SSDs, you take off the SSD mounts, then you slide the SSD into the mount and then back into the case. So that's going to wrap up this part of the computer build. One last thing I'd like to say though is the only tools I needed was a small model making screwdriver, a standard screwdriver, and unfortunately the mini wrench to help loosen some of the hand screws that were a little too tight. I hope you liked this video and consider checking out one of the other videos in the computer build series along with subscribing. Thanks.